So with AI, I'm super bullish on the marketing generalist. There might be fewer roles in the future, but as a product marketer, you'll have the opportunity to do a lot more different things. And I think that's only positive because it gives you a much more well-rounded view of the business and what the business needs.
You are listening to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. I'm your host, Louise Liu, Product Marketing Hive, and this podcast is supported by Product Marketing Edge, a technology product marketing consulting firm. In this episode, Katie Noe, a product marketing manager at Bizzabo, shares her thoughts on AI and competitive intelligence. Let's dive into it right now. Hi, Katie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Louise. Thanks so much for having me.
Great. It's our pleasure to have you on the podcast. So tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you transition into product marketing?
Yeah, so I recently transitioned into product marketing. This is a relatively new role for me. I have over 7 years of experience, and I've always worked in marketing for small B2B SaaS teams. I started out actually as a content marketer at an ed tech startup, and that company grew a lot. And as that company grew, I was able to take on a bunch of different responsibilities within the marketing org. And I started realizing I was doing actually a lot of product marketing without realizing it. I was doing messaging and positioning and sales enablement and really enjoying it. So when I was looking for new roles, I had kind of in my mind boxed myself into that content role, but I didn't really think beyond it until I started talking with my current company, Bizzabo. I originally interviewed with them for a content role, but our CMO came back to me and said, "Hey, what about this product marketing role?" And it was a great fit. And since then, I've never looked back. I love product marketing.
So tell us about your current role and your responsibility as a product marketing manager at Bizzabo.
Yeah, so to start with just a little bit of background about Bizzabo, it's an event management platform. And if you are an event marketer listening, or if you've ever planned an event, you know there's a ton of moving parts. And our platform reflects that, right? It's an enterprise grade platform. There's a ton of different things that it does. It's really powerful. But our product marketing team at Bizzabo is two people. It's just myself and my manager. So with my responsibilities, I kind of do a little bit of everything. I do product launches, I do messaging positioning work, I do enablement. But really, the things that I'm the most excited about are competitive intel and win loss, which I think we're going to talk about today. I'm pretty excited to talk about that.
Let's explore a little bit of history. So before AI, how were you approaching win-loss and competitive analysis? And maybe from your perspective, tell us a little bit more about the challenges and limitation come with that historic approach.
For sure. Yeah. So there were two different work streams there between win loss and competitive analysis. But the thing that tied them all together was that we were really only getting internal information. So for our win loss program, we have our sellers that have a few different fields that they have to fill out in Salesforce to close out a deal. And so that's where we were getting a lot of our win loss intel. But again, the limitation of that is you're only getting the internal perspective. We weren't hearing anything from the buyer's perspective, which can be difficult because our sellers do a great job of managing their deals. But sometimes there's always a little bit of a wall up where a buyer isn't going to be completely honest with their seller. So we needed to figure out how to get some of that external proof points so that we could have a more full view of why we were winning and losing deals. And then on the other hand, for compete, it was really ad hoc. We had a competition Slack channel that we would rely on our sellers, our SEs, our CSMs to just send information to, whether that was a Gong link or something they came across on LinkedIn. Um, when the limitation there was that we really knew Gong had a lot more to offer in terms of competitive intel. But as I'm sure everyone knows, Gong can be a complete black hole. It can be a completely manual process to comb through that. So we needed to figure out a way to consolidate those insights that wasn't just relying on our internal folks to send them to us.
Thank you for painting the picture. So tell us a little bit more about the transition. What specifically led you to explore AI for competitive intelligence?
Yeah. So prior to looking at AI, it just started with a business need. our executive team, a major focus was to increase our win rates. And we knew that we only had those internal perspectives. The other thing that sort of made this a big challenge goes back to the scale. Like I said with Bizzabo, our platform is big, it does a lot of different things. And so different buyers might be talking about completely different sections of the platform in any given deal. So knowing that that was our baseline, AI was the perfect way to go. I think with AI, it makes large data sets just a lot easier to understand. So that's what really led us to AI as a solution. Um, I will say at this point, when we decided to launch our win loss program, budgets were accounted for and we didn't have additional headcount. So we couldn't really go into this with a perfect tool or a person, a researcher to own it internally. We, as the product marketing team, had to build a bridge. So I think a lot of small teams run into this. They want to start something, but they might not have the resources to do it. And so we wrote a really great brief, got everyone on board, and then built a bridge with some of the AI tools that we already had in our tech stack.
Yeah, this is very interesting because a lot of product marketers, especially they're in the company with limited resources at their own disposal. So it's interesting to hear your story. Let's discover a little bit more in terms of workflow. Which part did you target first, and then why did you decide to look at them first?
Yeah. So interestingly, looking at the entire workflow, the pull first part of it is pretty manual. We decided to use AI specifically for after we talked to buyers to look at the data and understand what the data was telling us. What we didn't use AI for, which I actually think is just as important in this conversation, was that initial buyer outreach and conversations. I actually put on my BDR hat in the organization. I did cold outreach. I was sending those emails manually. And that certainly took a lot of time, but I think it added the human touch that we needed to get the insights that we could then use AI for on the other side to synthesize and figure out, what was really happening in those deals.
Can you walk us through how AI is used today in your win-loss program? Maybe give us kind of like a step-by-step walkthrough.
Yeah, definitely. So, as I mentioned before, the whole first part of the process is pretty manual because you were building a bridge. This isn't an idealized situation. So, when we pull down the Salesforce list, we send email outreach, we conduct the interviews via Google Meet or Zoom or whatever you have at your disposal, and then we upload those to Gong. So that whole part is pretty manual. That's what I do. And then after that interview is put into Gong, this is where our AI workflow comes in. At Bizzabo, we have Copy AI. So I built a Copy AI workflow that's pretty powerful. And what that's doing is it's mapping the interview transcript to 3 different decision drivers. So I have a list of about 30 different inputs that could decide a win or a loss. And this copy AI workflow is trained to identify those and then also identify sentiment. So whether that's positive or negative for the deal. It pulls out a few other things too. It pulls out the evaluation must haves, who we competed against, some specific customer quotes. And then all of that information goes into a Google Sheet, which is then sent into Notebook LM, which is an awesome tool. I love using Notebook LM. And so I then can query that Notebook LM for all of this aggregated data. And it's awesome because I found that it doesn't hallucinate like Chat GPT does. I've tried this on a custom GPT and it was making things up. So just doing it within Notebook makes sure that everything is accurate and I can trust it.
So tell us a little bit more about the outcomes of this implementation of AI. Were there any useful insights that you can discover with AI where you couldn't before?
Yeah, yeah. So I feel like I'm a broken record at this point, but I always go back to the scale of the platform. And one thing that has been super cool to understand with AI is the breakdown of how our ICP buyers evaluate our product versus our non-ICP. So another thing that that copy AI workflow does is tag each conversation. And so now I can query to understand the differences and actually have cool story about this. We were noticing in H1 of last year, 2025, that we are losing a bunch of deals on price. And so, if you didn't know better, that might lead you to evaluate, oh, well, maybe we need to look at our pricing structure. Maybe we need to change that up. But looking at this data, we noticed that a lot of the deals that we were losing on price were non-ICP. So those were buyers that we weren't necessarily targeting. So we were able to, save that whole project and go in a different direction and understand better how we could cater to those ICP buyers.
That's interesting. How do you see it to fit into other aspects of marketing work?
So, really, at the end of the day, this is used throughout the organization. I mentioned that Notebook LM, it's available to query at any time. And I know my counterparts in marketing, especially content marketing and demand marketing, have used this to inform things like paid ads or different content focuses for the year. So that's really exciting to see. And then also quarterly, I create a deck from the insights from the last quarter's interviews and surveys. And I send that to a bunch of different places. For me, a lot of win loss is just making sure it's visible throughout the company. So I send it in an email to our leadership team with executive level insights. And then quarterly, I take it and present it at the sales weekly meeting, the CS weekly meeting, the product manager weekly meeting, and I make sure I'm pulling out things that are specifically helpful to those teams. So the message is different for every single group. So, for example, for a sales meeting, I might say, hey, last quarter, some of these buyers didn't feel like their conversations were persona specific. So, let's review some of our resources around personas. Or for product managers, we might say, hey, we lost a few deals last month on this specific part of the product. What are our plans for roadmap? Do we need to reprioritize? So that helps have those more strategic conversations based in actual buyer data instead of just guessing or internal feelings, kind of like we had before.
So I remember when we last met, you were saying that one of the impact from this AI enabled or AI powered competitive intelligence work is it changed the way your executive engage with win loss data. And can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually have a great example from this week when I sent out our end of year analysis earlier in January. So the thing that's really cool about the Notebook LM and the AI enabled workflow is that it allows our executive team to dive deeper where they are interested and where they want to. So a great example is this week, I sent this out to our team. Our CEO had a question about one of the slides and he was able to go to the notebook and answer the question himself. He didn't have to wait for me to go back and do a reanalysis and put together a slide and run it through design. It's just so much more of a self-serve workflow. And especially when the executive team has such a wide purview, they're working on so many different projects. It's awesome to have that data available right at their fingertips whenever they want to look at it.
Tell us a little bit more about your learnings along the way. What didn't work as expected when you first introduced AI, and were there any assumptions that you made at the time that you had to kind of readjust or rethink?
For sure. AI is so good at oversimplification. And I think this is why it was important to have the manual process at the beginning, because I was sitting in those interviews. And so I was remembering things that were important to me. And at first, when I ran it through our AI workflow, it was stripping out all of the interesting stuff. So I learned how to be very, very specific with the prompts. I'm sure, everyone's heard this a million times, but being as specific as you can with the prompts really does help. So two examples. At first, when I started running interviews through our workflow, the output was so long. And I was like, nobody is reading this. I need to keep it way shorter. So I would tell our AI, keep this to 1 to 2 sentences. And that changed the quality. The other thing was being specific with my words. So if we're looking for evaluation criteria, at first I might have said something like, well, what did the buyer want? But that's too broad. I need to make it more specific and ask, note must haves in their new solution. And that also changed the quality.
So you also mentioned that you were collaborating closely with your director of AI to build these workflow automations and some tools for these competitive insights. Can you share the story? How did that collaboration go? And then maybe some helpful tips forging this like trustful collaboration relationship.
For sure. Yeah. So this goes back to resources. Kind of when we started the win-loss program, we didn't have internal AI resources. But throughout the course of 2025, Bizzabo actually made a hire. Our director of AI, his name is Ohad. He is on the product team, but he has a mission also to help implement AI internally. So one of his very first projects was actually for our customer success team. And he used the Gong API to pull down calls for each customer and created a notebook LM that you could then query to get updated on the customer account. And I thought this was so cool. And I thought that he could help me do something similar for our competitive intel. So we've had several meetings over the course of a few months, and he used the Gong API to pull down tracking information. So we have trackers for each of our main competitors, and he was able to pull the call snippets associated with each of those trackers and put them into Notebook LM. And so that's already hugely powerful because I'm sure as many marketers know, Gong sort of goes account by account, and it's pretty manual to be able to pull insights from across accounts. But now I have this tool where I can do that. And beyond Gong now, we're enriching it with Salesforce data. We're enriching it with information from that competition Slack channel that I mentioned before. So now everything will be in one place instead of being dispersed across multiple tools.
So let's talk about big picture. How do you envision the evolving role of product marketing in the future, like AI first environment, AI first world? What kind of responsibilities or opportunities that you do see emerging these days?
Yeah. So with AI, I'm super bullish on the marketing generalist, which is awesome because I consider myself a little bit of a marketing generalist. So this feels like a great future for people like me. When I think back to, large companies and the way product marketing teams are structured, even just in the context of this conversation, you might have one hire that's doing win loss and another hire that's doing competitive intel, and those are two completely different people. But now with AI, I'm one person, I'm one product marketer, and I can be doing both of those programs and getting really cool and interesting results. So that's awesome. There might be fewer roles in the future, but as a product marketer, you'll have the opportunity to do a lot more different things. And I think that's only positive because it gives you a much more well rounded view of the business and what the business needs. So, marketing generalists, this is your time. I don't think we need to niche down anymore now that we have AI.
So looking ahead, how do you envision to scale or grow AI-enabled competitive intelligence work in the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So, sort of two sides here for our win loss program. I mentioned last year as we were building it, we were building a bridge, like I said, with tools that we already had. But after a full year of doing this and measuring impact, we were actually able to get our own dedicated tool. So, this year in 2026, we have a tool that's now going to automate the first part of that different process with the outreach and collecting the insights. So now this is an end-to-end AI-enabled program, which is really awesome. And since we're not at all limited now by my time, hopefully we can get a lot more volume. So that's our goal for win-loss. For competitive analysis, I kind of mentioned before, we're still in the early stages of rolling out this resource with the Gong API and Notebook LM. So our goal there is to introduce it organization wide and make it the single source of truth for competitive intel. And the way we're going to measure that is looking at competitive win rates moving forward.
This is exciting. I'm looking forward to hearing more news from you about how it goes. So, tell us if a product marketer wanted to pilot AI-enabled win-loss or competitive analysis program, where would you tell them to start?
Yeah. So I'm thinking back to when I was starting to think about this, and I know it can be overwhelming to think about it when you don't have the perfect set of resources. So many webinars I see or examples on LinkedIn are just like this perfect situation, and I don't think that that's realistic in a lot of organizations. So if you're looking to start because you know this is important, one thing that I would do is audit your existing resources and your tech stack. So that would be people and technology. What do you have already at your disposal that you can use? I think now, with LLMs like ChatGPT, like Notebook LM, like these things are super powerful. And a lot of times you have them already. So think about what you can do there. From there, what I would do is write a brief. I think this brief that I wrote and my boss wrote together was so important to get everyone on the same page. What are the goals of this program? What are we trying to figure out? Lay out, the process and what you're going to have to do manually and what you can do with AI. I believe that we had so much more buy-in on this program because we had alignment right from the beginning. And then don't be afraid to do things manually for a time. I think that, sure, it's a little bit more work, but these insights are so interesting and actually have business impact. So, for things like win loss or anything, honestly, that gets you in front of buyers and customers, I think that's worth doing manually, and I would not shy away from that.
Great thoughts. Thank you for sharing. So we're getting to the end of our time here. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I would love to talk more about these things with anyone who's listening. So, win loss, competitive intel, my DMs are open. I'm on LinkedIn, Katie Noe, and I try to respond as much as I can over there. So, please reach out. Would love to continue the conversation over there.
Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for tuning in to This is Product Marketing, brought to you by Product Marketing Hive, a product marketing community that gives back. Check out our website, productmarketinghive.com, to join our community, meet fellow product marketers, and access free resources. If you enjoyed our podcast, please subscribe and give a 5-star rating on the platform of your choice. See you next time.